No more stalling, no more lecturing. It's time to actually get started on writing some tests. In this video, we're going to make access to Web3 and use it to retrieve a list of accounts that are automatically created for us as a part of this local Ganache network. Remember, we can only deploy a contract when we have access to an account. So let's take a look at a diagram that's going to help us understand this. So you and I are going to use the Web3 library that has already been configured to connect to this local test network that gets started up by Ganache. We're going to use Web3 to access this list of unlocked accounts that are created automatically for us by Ganache. These accounts are defaulted as being unlocked or 100% accessible just to make our lives for testing a lot easier. When we say unlocked accounts, remember, it just means that we can freely send or receive ether from these accounts without any concern over private keys or security or anything like that. Again, it's just to make our lives easier. So let's figure out how we're going to use Web3 to get access to these accounts. Inside of my inbox.test.js file, I'll first start off by defining a before each statement. So remember, the process of deploying a contract is something we are going to do every time we run a test. So chances are, every time that we run a test, we're going to want to grab our big list of accounts and then use one of those accounts to deploy our contract to our test network. And with that in mind, maybe we should put in some comments here to guide us. So right inside the before each, I'll place a comment that says, get a list of all accounts. And then underneath that, we'll say, use one of those accounts to deploy the contract. All right, so now the question becomes, how do we use the Web3 library to get access to a list of all unlocked accounts? Well, in practice, it's kind of straightforward. We're going to say web3.eth.get accounts, like so. There's a couple things I want to mention about this. First, notice that we are using lowercase web3. We are using our instance of web3 that we have already created. To be 100% clear, we only make reference to the capital W web3 one time, and that's when we first require it in and then use it to create an instance. So we have lowercase web3 right here. The Web3 library has many different modules assigned to it, and it can be used for working with different types of cryptocurrency. In this case, we are accessing one particular module, and that is the module that has to do with Ethereum, abbreviated here as ETH. So we're looking at the ETH module of the Web3 library. And then on that module, we are accessing the get accounts function. There's one thing I'm going to tell you right now, and this is going to be true of everything we do with Web3. Every function, almost every, I almost want to say every function. Yeah, I think every function that we call with Web3 is asynchronous in nature. And that means that it's always going to be returning a promise. So this function right here is going to return a promise that gets resolved with a list of accounts that we care about. So to get access to that list of accounts that this thing returns, we have to chain on a .then, and that's going to take a function that will be called with our list of accounts. Maybe we'll just call this well, how about fetched accounts? That actually is important you'll see why in just a second. So we're going to call it fetched accounts right here. And then we want to just, I don't know, maybe console log out the list of accounts that we've fetched. So let's say console.log fetched accounts, like so. Now to actually get this code to execute inside the before each, we do have to write out one test. So I'd like to just write out kind of a dummy test for right now, and then run this at our terminal so that we can see the console log of all the accounts that got fetched from our Ganache local network. So underneath the before each statement, I'm going to add a describe block. We're going to describe our inbox contract, and I'm going to place a single it deploys a contract. And then I'll pass that a arrow function as a second argument. So again, we're writing out an it statement right here just to make sure that our before each statement will run at least one time. We're not going to add any logic to it just yet. We'll come back in a moment and add that in. All right, so let's save this, and then we'll run these tests from the command line to make sure that the list of accounts is properly fetched. If you skipped the video about Mocha a couple of sections ago, then there is one small change that you have to make. Inside of your package.json file, find the scripts section and update the test script to say simply mocha, like so. So if you skip that previous video, make sure you make this change. And then once you do, we'll be able to flip on over to our terminal and run these tests. So inside of my inbox directory, I'll execute npm run test. You're going to notice that it actually takes quite a bit of time for these tests to run now. Well, maybe not just yet. It takes a little bit longer, I guess, because now we're actually getting access to Ganache, and that takes just a little bit of time to warm up. So after our tests run, you'll see a listing of 10 separate accounts. These are pre-generated accounts that are created by that Ganache local test network automatically. All 10 of these accounts are completely unlocked, so we can use any of them to deploy contracts, to send money, to call a function on a contract, anything we want to do. These 10 accounts are created just to make our lives easier, so that we don't have to manually create an account every time that we want to run a test. So Ganache is really great in that regard. Do remember again that it is solely a local test network. It's only for executing tests and contracts locally, really just for development purposes. So it's really optimized to make our lives easier. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We've figured out how to use Web3. We figured out that there is a module called eth that contains a lot of the different functions that are related to Ethereum. And we use the getAccounts function in particular. Let's take a break right now. We're going to come back in the next video and do just a little bit of code cleanup inside this file, and then continue on with our first if statement. So I'll see you in just a minute.